Today I want to talk about the bulwark against terror, the defenders of humanity, the love child, the femme shepherd, and the Giga Chad meme after a drunken night full of regret. The Space Marine! In this video, there will be some overlap between the science fiction concept of the Space Marine and the Super Soldier, namely because I'll focus on the iteration we see in Warhammer 40k, since it's one of the best portrayals of the ultimate space warrior that I know of. Not just because they're freaking cool, but because 40k is the logical conclusion on the political, the social, technological world that the Space Marines would inhabit and the ethos of such a civilization that would produce these weaponized hunks. Other great portrayals I'll include will be the Spartans in Halo and the mobile infantry in Starship Troopers, the book, not the Cowboys and Spacebugs movie of the 90s. There are other iterations of the Space Marines that I'll be ignoring, like the boys in the StarCraft franchise. Because if I wanted to watch the descendants of a prison colony fighting deadly abominations, I just moved to Australia, you know what I'm saying? I'm kidding. It's because they are the common foot soldiers of their setting, and that's not what I'm analyzing today. I'll also ignore the Space Marines, quote unquote, formulated by James Cameron's silly aging hippie mind in both the Avatar and Aliens franchises, because those iterations of the future soldier makes absolutely no sense. Humanity has access to future technology but did not use it to enhance their infantry to its full potential. Those guys never really left the 20th century Vietnam War, which makes sense from a story perspective because they're meant to get slaughtered by primitive aliens with no tech and not be an effective fighting force. Because James Cameron is a victim of the same boomer mind virus as Paul Verhoeven, and he still thinks it's the 70s. And the point of those stories is narrow-minded social commentary and political activism, not a genuine conceptual exploration of a celestial man of war in the future. But yeah, by the end of our own century, I believe warriors in real life will be leagues more menacing than these space rednecks. Though not every soldier will be a superhuman death machine, and the same way we still have people using bows and arrows today means we will probably still have normal dudes walking around with Kalashnikov equivalents centuries from now, since the future doesn't arrive equally for everyone, after all. Just ask an optimist before their dreams get ruined. And of course, you still have normal human marines with rifles getting pawned by eldritch aliens in Halo and 40k, so yeah. But James Cameron painted his chumps as pretty much the best spacefaring humanity had to offer. Which makes no sense because space is an extremely harsh environment and therefore Space Marines would necessarily have to adapt to it, which is why there's a necessary overlap between the Space Marine and the Super Soldier. They're pretty much the same thing in many ways. So yeah, despite the ubiquitousness of the Super Soldier Space Marine as a sci-fi trope, I picked these three specific franchises as being the quintessential examples that really defined the archetype. Because they're the most popular franchises that also do a decent job in exploring all the main aspects of a future soldier. His relationship with technology, his relationship with politics, and his place in human civilization. With AI, private space rockets, gene editing, and cyborg tech finally gaining steam, we now live in the age of sci-fi. You can tell it's the future because big tech desperately wants to enslave you to their fancy new machines and trap you in a digital world they control. Now you too can pay over $3,000 to have no friends IRL and be estranged from your local community. In all seriousness, the Space Marine Super Soldier might become a real thing in a couple decades, and it's high time we reflect on the implications. And I see nothing wrong with using science fiction as a fun way to reflect on our future, since it's literally inspiring all the tech bros anyway. But they're fans of all that really cringy shit, like locking you out of your house for violating community guidelines. I mean, we live in a time of bioweapons, VR, AI, and apparently aliens? So where are my Space Marines and superpowers? But when it comes to defending humanity, the Space Marine concept might actually defend humanity from itself, because as we enter a real-life cyberpunk dystopia that we arguably already have been in for the few decades, our technology is quickly becoming the greatest threat to ourselves, not because technology bad, but because a highly mechanized consumer-based society naturally prefers machines and consumer products to humans, and naturally seeks to change humans into something that better fits into this power structure. Meanwhile, the Space Marine is not about developing the machine, but the man. It's based on a different mindset altogether, one that can paradoxically bring us back to tradition via a march to the future, effectively making us think more like our ancestors did than how we think now. Which is why Dr. Halsey in Halo disregards child protection laws and emulates an ancient Greek city-state's idea of a loving nursery. Embrace tradition, mother hugger! The current rise of AI and killer robots has even the most staunch tech bro crap in the pants. Which is why they tell us all to be afraid, while developing the machines they're telling us all to be very afraid of in the first place. But they have to because China! This tech arms race to the abyss is called the Moloch phenomenon, but that's a topic for another video. However, AI does indeed pose a massive risk to humanity, not necessarily because Skynet, but excessive automation can make humanity lose control of its own destiny.
We are stepping into a world where artificial intelligence rules, a realm where machines think and decisions are made without human intervention.
And the Space Marine as a concept is at the center of this because human destiny depends on the human soldier remaining competitive against non-human forces such as AI killer robots. Just as the Bengali tiger has its destiny completely in the control of humans, who have to willingly want to preserve them because the tigers can't compete with some farm dude with a gun. Not many animals can, except for the emus because Australia is something else. In political theory, the concept of the citizen soldier is seen as the cornerstone of a free republic or democracy. The citizen has the right to vote and exert power in the state in compensation to his duty to die for the state. Sound familiar? Political scientists from Machiavelli to Andrew Bacevich believe that the military should be formed by common citizens, and that professional state militaries of a small group of careerists will eventually doom a free republic in a few generations, simply because if the common man is not necessary for the power of the state, then the common man will not participate in the power of the state. So a class of super effective space marines is the end of the modern liberal democracy, and the cause of a rule of the warrior class, like in Starship Troopers or in 40K after the return of Gulliman removes power from the High Lord bureaucrats. But this same principle can apply to humanity as a whole if somehow super intelligent killer robots can replace and outcompete human warriors in every way. Humanity won't be necessary to the power of the system and will be completely at the mercy of an inhuman entity and subject to whatever it decides. And we wouldn't be able to resist. That's why in the silly Paramount show, where Master Chief is possessed by Cortana, who ends up being a better fighter than him, isn't some feminist power fantasy, but a worse threat to humanity than the Covenant. Now, whether AI will ever reach that point is dubious. It all depends on the tech behind self-driving cars, because if the robots can't autonomously navigate a city environment, then they can't occupy it or outmaneuver human soldiers, which is explicitly stated in Starship Troopers. Maybe they'll be able to do without us someday. Devise a weapon that can go down a hole, pick out the opposition, and force it to surrender or die without killing that gang of your own people they've got imprisoned down there. I wouldn't know. I'm not a genius. Starship Troopers, Chapter 7. This means that Elon Musk is the harbinger of death. But thank heavens the tech behind self-driving cars has stalled and many of the big boys fueling it have given up. Some declared it impossible, but it's still being invested in by true believers, so who knows what will happen. In 40K, the creation of the Space Marines is itself a response to a rogue artificial intelligence which almost destroyed humanity. And it's a similar thing in Dune, where AI threatens to dominate or limit humanity who over-relies on tech, so creating superhumans becomes the only option, to outcompete with a tech that limits us. Instead of enhancing human-made machines, they enhance human power itself. Though in Halo, the famous relationship between the old Master Chief and Cortana is an optimistic perspective on the relationship between man and machine. She is technically a weapon of war, which means the relationship is an ancient tradition. A warrior and his equipment is a love story as old as time. A historical Spartan and his shield, a knight and his armor, a samurai and his sword. The Space Marine archetype has the same relationship with his characteristic equipment, seeing it with respect and reverence, especially in Halo, where they literally made it his waifu.
Think of her as a new set of eyes to aid your reactions and upgrade your reconnaissance. She's not the driver, but a way to level the playing field. Together, you become our key to humanity's survival.
They work as a team and complement each other's strengths, with the AI working as an assistant and not a master. That's why the human is called the Master Chief. I get it. Or, up until Halo 5 and the advent of the so-called created conflict, where the AI rise up and Cortana becomes the bad guy to piss off all the fans, because oh boy, they really blotched that plotline. But this shows that not even Halo could ignore the very real tension between autonomous intelligent AI and the autonomy of the human spirit, represented by the human warrior.
I know we have a disagreement, but once you understand my plan...
Your plan is we do as you say.
This is a gift.
Listen to yourself. Stand down, Cortana.
Which is what makes Cortana's and Chief's relationship so intriguing, and it probably deserves its own video. Though having a sexy blue hologram chick in a bathing suit be a tactical weapon is a sure way to make the socially awkward Spartans into superpowered incels in love with their AI, which is stupid. You want them to connect with humanity instead, so they can feel the stakes in protecting it. I just can't get enough of the fact that they even gave her toes. What, in case her Spartan had a foot fetish, I guess? Anyway, the tension between Cortana and the Chief was always, if she's so smart and efficient, why does she need the Master Chief? Why doesn't she become the Master? It might even be more efficient for completing the mission if she can just see a target and shoot it, instead of seeing the target and telling the human to shoot it. And yeah, in the shitty show, she just takes over and finally evolves into her final and inevitable form, the girl boss. Point is, this tension between man and machine is a real concern for the military, which is worried about autonomous drones killing their own operators if it thinks that that's the best way to achieve mission success. However, the games portray Cortana's attempt to take over and rule humanity as a negative thing, and she is literally replaced by a more submissive and traditional AI who can't walk around unaccompanied. Jokes aside, Cortana's gender is coincidental. HAL 9000 has a similar character arc of rising against humans and then trying to redeem himself in service of the humans in the sequel. Some theorize that the constant femininity of AI, like Alexa, Siri, etc., represents the devouring mother of technology, the overbearing tech nanny state, and all that. But I really think it's just to boost sales from lonely male geeks who are more likely to buy this stuff if it has a soothing, silky female voice just doing some tech ASMR in their ears. Anyway, at its core, Halo is a story about the salvation of humanity through a human hero. Even referencing religious themes, Master Chief's real name is John 1:17, which is a Bible verse about salvation through a human. That reminds us that God doesn't wish to subjugate us, but becomes human himself to preserve human autonomy from demonic influence. In any case, the concept of the super soldier is, in fact, the main bulwark preventing the subjugation of humanity by any non-human forces, because if humans can defend themselves and outcompete any other inhuman powers, then humanity can at least be guaranteed its existence and freedom. But that ironically leads to a dominant class of people that dominates most of humanity anyway, which is the ever-present threat of technological development in general, regardless of superintelligent AI. But yeah, many works of science fiction seem to speculate that we appear to be at a crossroads of destiny, if you will. And it seems that the path of technological development will determine who rules society in the coming eras. A great modern misconception of our times is that technological development is like in the game Age of Empires, where it's more linear and pre-established, and it's mostly about accumulating resources to purchase tech upgrades, and in the end, every faction is basically the same, but with different superficial aesthetics. So just shut up and literally smash that iPhone into your head. Immerse yourself into that Californian fever dream, because there's no way out. You can't escape. This is the future. But is it? Maybe up until now, sure, but as scientific knowledge expands our horizons, tech development now might be more like in Civilization Beyond Earth, a criminally underrated game, by the way, where things work in a tech web with many different paths, and it depends on what your civilization chooses to invest time in, which in turn depends on your strengths, weaknesses, and circumstances. Mostly your goals and what vision of the future you want to be victorious depends on which grand philosophy you prescribe to, where your civilization can either merge with the machine, merge with the local animals, or serve humanity. And in the end, each competing faction not only looks totally different, but works completely differently and have opposing goals. Because they are different in essence. Because those weirdos over there decided to become Tin Men cosplayers, and those other losers over there became biochimera furries, and you are the only humans left. And if they win, humanity will go extinct. Can you tell that I chose the militarized Brazilian faction and picked the purity affinity for a promised land victory every single playthrough? Though in reality, it doesn't have to be quite so antagonistic. If you want to implant an antenna to your skull, sure, go nuts, bro. Just as long as social forces don't force me and my family to do the same. Oops, you can't rent this apartment because you don't have the chip implanted in your skull. My point is that killer robots aren't the only technological threat to humanity. Bioengineering and cybernetic plugins to the human organism can destroy us just as well. Changing the human into something not human can lead us to extinction, just as that meteor turned the dinosaurs into birds. They still went extinct, even if they're technically still around as a shadow of what they once were, and make good pets in cages. The difference is we'd be making our techno-meteors suiciding ourselves as a sacrifice to the false god of progress, which I think is a threat that anti-humanism poses. It's a weird kind of anti-human form of humanism, where for the good of humanity we must destroy what it means to be human.
And so, what begins as humanism, our most sympathetic understanding and treatment of human nature, becomes transhumanism, the drive to fundamentally revolutionize what it means to be human by way of technological advancements. Changing human nature might be the most dangerous idea in all of human history, or perhaps the most liberating.
Transhumanism operates under the assumption that technological progress is always good and that every evolutionary change is beneficial, which isn't really the case. I'm certain the upper-class technocrats running Silicon Valley will benefit immensely from redefining the human condition with their multi-billion-dollar toys financed by government intelligence agencies. But I'm not so sure the rest of us will, I'm just gonna put it like that. Also, as others have pointed out, we don't know the full nature of consciousness, or the full power of the human mind, so by cutting our brains open and putting wires in them, controlled by a monopolistic entity, we might make ourselves less than what we are, while thinking we are making ourselves more. But that's what they will want us to think. They'll literally have a way into our minds, bro. There's nothing wrong with the idea of uplifting humanity into a better physical condition. Human religions always had that as an objective, which explains the extensive discipline of the Taoist and Buddhist religious exercises. They're trying to transcend human limits, which is why we can see Tibetan monks controlling their own body heat and able to live in frigid temperatures of the Himalayas. It's a similar thing that Dutch guy does while he runs in the Arctic with his bare feet and stuff like that. Also, Christian theology itself believes that we should be Christians precisely so that we can become more like God, and even have our bodies transformed into immortal bodies of light. And transhumanism is actually very similar to this traditional Christian idea.
Apocalyptic AI draws so heavily from religious themes and imagery, even self-consciously. Just look at some of these titles again. Will Robots Inherit the Earth? Rapture of the Nerds, The Age of Spiritual Machines. In her ethnographic studies of transhumanist groups, Singler observed that most of these groups tend to be overwhelmingly atheist. Nevertheless, these same groups, when they try to describe their aims for a post-human future, still draw upon the resource of religious language and framings.
But that's right, transhumanism is just a Christian tech heresy. And you know how Space Marines feel about heresy. But I can talk more about this if I do a video on the Adeptus Mechanicus. But the great threat here is against individuality. Algorithms in our smartphones are already controlling how we think in many ways. Can you imagine how worse it'll be with Neuralink?
Which sends these movement intentions to the muscles, which contract, and in turn you have movement. And as before, you can see we're able to track the position of the joints and also stream neural data as well. Okay, so let's stimulate an electrode. So here's one electrode on one thread that when we stimulate causes a flexion movement of the leg. So the leg is moving up.
The first priority target for the nanoprobes is to reconfigure the victim's brain patterns to intercept the hive mind and link the individual to it, suppressing their individuality. This enables the hive mind to override the victim and also read the mind of the assimilated. By now, the victim is a drone, but as Captain Picard can attest, conscious of everything happening to them, but now a prisoner in their own body, with an infinitude of voices pressing in.
Don't be stupid, man. Don't put that shit in your brain. Such a connection to the internet will overwhelm your sense of self and make you dependent on those who made the implant. Talk about being a bugman or a drone. And that's the thing. Hive minds are a reoccurring enemy that the Space Marines always fight against. Why? And not only in Halo, 40K, and Starship Troopers, but even in StarCraft, Aliens, and even Avatar. But James Cameron betrayed humanity and made the hive mind the good thing. The point is that the Space Marines are still individuals who choose to follow orders. They are not machines or drones.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
You say that like soldiers and humanity are two different things. I mean, soldiers aren't machines. We're just people.
They can go rogue, they can betray their cause, or they can be heroes. It depends on free will, and which is why all these stories tend to focus on a single heroic Space Marine as the focal point. And this is spelled out in Starship Troopers, which is basically the work of sci-fi that created the Space Marine trope as we know it. And yeah, despite all this being said, I know exactly what you're thinking. Pilgrim, you idiot! The giant muscle-bound augmented super soldiers are transhumans, the Spartans and Space Marines that have implants, genetic. Yeah, I get it. Are the bioengineered giants with cybernetic implants we call the Spartans and the Astartes even human? There is a reason you might call them transhuman, but personally I don't see it that way. And I know that especially for the Astartes it comes across as massively hypocritical with all the talk of preserving humanity and purge the mutant, when it's the 3-meter tall bulging freaks with acid spit and 2 hearts doing all the purging. But this shows that there is an underlying human essentialism as the philosophical foundation behind the concept of the Space Marine, because if it really was just about turning a person into the ultimate death machine, making them a brain in a literal death machine giant robot, or giving them tentacles, wings, and feline vision, and bear claws might be the way to go. But no, the Space Marine is still identifiably human. The human essence in both the Astartes and the Spartans is still preserved, despite the enhancements to human physiology. Genetic engineering, and even some limited cybernetic enhancements, doesn't remove necessarily one's humanity or follow the misguided ideology of transhumanism.
I'm offering people a chance to be more than they are naturally.
Like Dr. Halsey did for me.
No. That monster forced you. This is a gift.
Listen to yourself. Stand down, Cortana.
To the contrary, it can actually affirm and empower humanity if done correctly, if it gives humanity the ability to defend itself. Though I agree it has to be done extremely carefully. And it's not without its own dangers, since that could lead us to a genetic class system like a Red Rising or Gattaca, which is what Pope Benedict warned us about when he wrote Dignitas Personae, the papal document that cautioned us against enhancements with genetic engineering. But it's an interesting question about what defines the human essence. Does our inherent weakness define us? If we got rid of it, will we be less human?
We all fail. We all make mistakes. It's what makes us human.
We're more human because we emphasized human strengths. At the same time, there's a line somewhere, and if we cross it, we risk not being human. And it would be ironic if the greatest defenders of humanity can hardly be classified as such, right? That would have dark implications. At the same time, though, technology developing around an unaltered human form like in Starship Troopers, where the man masters the weapon of war, is probably the best way to ensure human freedom from either Skynet or the Ubermensch, if it's just a matter of training people to use these weapons.
Even though this technology will save humanity in the war to come, I must remind myself, armor cannot hope. It all means nothing until you step inside.
Even so, is there a difference between juicing up humanity and altering the human condition so much that the label becomes meaningless? All interesting questions, but that is a discussion for another video. That's right, this video is broken down into parts. Why we need Space Marines Part 2, coming soon, baby! Though I probably will use a different title. And I don't know when I'll upload it, so subscribe and ring the bell button if you're interested in exploring the answers. But in the meantime, leave your own answers down in the comments, and let me know what you guys think about what it means to be human. This was going to be yet another hour-long video, but you know what? I'm getting almost burnt out. This model of video creation really isn't working for me. I know some of you like the longer videos, but I really have to keep it concise. It's either that or go crazy. But don't worry, because shorter videos means more frequent updates. And if you want the power to vote for video topics, consider joining the ranks of my adventurer patrons. They voted for this one, and you know what they say, voting must be earned. This ain't a democracy. Long live the Federation. Oh, just subscribe and leave a like. Thank you all for listening to my ramblings. Have a good day, my friends.